Merci, gracias, shukran, and thank you very much. 28 years and counting in policing, 25 of those with the RCMP, and as Peter had indicated before, in some pretty interesting places. The time that I've spent in those places, as well as in 4 different provinces across Canada, in Colombia, Cuba, as well as in the United States, have afforded me the chance to see and live different things that has really modified, I think, the way that I've looked at things and the way that I've acted over the years. What I want to be able to do, and I don't have any slides, and my apologies for that, is I want to be able to just share with you some of the lessons that I've learned and garnered that have allowed me to become not only a better leader, a better police leader, but a better individual, a better husband, a better neighbor, and I dare say just a better overall person. And hopefully you'll be able to take something from that. Before I do that, I just want to touch upon 2 definitions. And it was really timely that Mark came before me because he provided the first definition, and that is of leadership. In a single word, leadership is influence. It's how you influence people, taking them from point A to point B. The second one is a bit more nuanced, and that is of policing. Now, most people think about policing as being serve and protect. But if you drill down at the most basic level, what is policing at its most basic level? And I submit to you that policing is dealing with those challenges and those problems that people themselves cannot, would not, and should not deal with. As examples, a drunk driver on the road, a dog barking incessantly in the middle of the night, or an individual who has just had their home raided or a shed broken into. These are all things that individuals themselves shouldn't deal with, and in many cases they can't deal with it. And that's what policing is. We're the consummate problem solvers. In Halifax Regional Police, we've gone through a recent exercise for our strategic plan where we've identified ourselves as being intelligence-led problem-solving community contributors. Now, that's our end state where we want to go. That being said, if I step back a bit to where I went, and as Peter indicated in 2008, I was the Deputy Police Commissioner in charge of 1,700 police officers from different nationalities right across the world in Haiti. 2008 was a very challenging time for us in Haiti. In April, we had 2 weeks' worth of riots that resulted in 37 people being killed in those riots. I had to be on the front line because we had many communication breakdowns, and I had to direct our riot troops to be able to ensure the safety of, believe it or not, the rioters themselves. In August and September, we had 4 successive, and I mean literally successive, all in the space of a 2-week period, tropical storms / hurricanes that just hammered Haiti. In one single night, 1,100 people died in the small town of Gonaïves. I was on the front lines to be able to direct and lead the UN police response to that crisis. And then finally in 2008, in November of that same year, we had a school collapse. 93 children and about 7 staff died in that collapse. I was the site commander watching as every single body was brought forth in front of me. We had a difficult situation whereby there was a child who was left alive, who was found by the rescue team, sandwiched between 2 dead children. I had to make the decision to order the cutting in half of the body of one of the dead children so as to save the life of that child. When I left Haiti in January 2009, I left a changed individual. I went home and I figured my time in Haiti is done. In 2010, in January, the 12th of January to be exact, at 4:53 p.m., a magnitude 7.2 earthquake hit. At that moment and in the days that followed, 250,000 people were killed. Included in those 250,000 people were 2 Canadian police officers, one of whom had actually replaced me a few months prior. I had to go on the ground, and I had to, for all intents and purposes, find them and dig them up. Brought them home with another police officer. We were each placed into a funeral coach, and we rode along the Highway of Heroes. I saw and watched in absolute wonder the thousands of people who braved the cold in that early February afternoon, saluting, waving flags, Canadian flags as well as UN flags, as we go by in absolute respect for those 2 fallen police officers. Time went by, and I went into my regular work mode, but there was something that was just egging me, bothering me, and I couldn't figure quite what it was until I met up with somebody who suggested that I go see a psychiatrist. Now, one of the reasons why I'm wearing my uniform right here goes without saying that I'm the police chief. I've been introduced as such, but to let you know what I am not. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a psychologist. I'm a simple patient. In January 2012, 2 years after coming back from Haiti, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Now, I've learned a lot about what PTSD is, and especially what PTSD is not. So first off, we're all human beings in this room. Whether it's your first dog that passed away, or being involved in an accident, or losing your best friend because of a move. We've all gone through traumatic experiences. So tell me, put your hand up if you've gone through a traumatic experience. Yeah, you can put your hand down, no problem. I'm going to keep my hand up for a moment just to illustrate something. You're human, and it's just normal. What happens is that we go through these very rare events, and we have normal reactions to them. That is post-traumatic stress. The disorder part comes about when it just persists, it stays on there. And this is what PTSD is. It's a normal reaction to abnormal stress that hangs around. So you have this bad memory here. What happens, and this happens for me as well as those of us who are afflicted with it, is that you also have this physiological response that occurs. The 2 are entwined, and try as you may, you can't break them up. So every time I think of something or I'm triggered, and it could be something as simple as the crack in a sidewalk, it brings me back to the time in Haiti when I was digging up the body of not only my friend, but the many other friends and colleagues with whom I'd worked in 2008. What also happens is that you get that physiological response that hits you. The pulse is racing, sweating. Anxiety sets in. And it's very, very difficult to break that. For myself, what I do is I keep myself in a constant state of movement. I walk the dogs twice a day. Well, actually, they walk me, to be honest with you. Okay. I walk all around the office. You can ask the people with whom I work, and they'll tell you about that. I have a stand-up desk to facilitate my movement. I work out. I'm not quite as good as Jim earlier on when he said 360 days a year, but I try as best I can to get to the gym. Right? And I do something, believe it or not, totally crazy that allows me to relax. I referee minor hockey. Go figure. Okay? All that to say is that there are ways of dealing with it, and all I can do is manage it. I don't drink because of that. I don't smoke dope for that and many other reasons. Okay? But keeping in mind that this is something that I live with on a daily basis. The reason why I have to manage this is not because of the PTSD per se, but it's what skulks around me on a regular basis. And that thing that skulks around me, and those people who have PTSD, and that drive people to do themselves and others harm, is depression. So that's the second part. PTSD is not depression. It's something that you live with and you manage it. But you manage it in such a way so as to avoid that depression. So now that I've depressed you folks, all right, what do I want to get to? Well, the whole notion of leadership is such that I want to influence people. And within the policing environment, you can well appreciate where I work and where I have worked, the culture is deeply ingrained. And we're doing our best to change that. Graham spoke about the challenges in government. I could have juxtaposed that onto a policing culture. It's a challenge. And the biggest challenge that we have to deal with is the attitudes that are there. We've seen what's happened in Ferguson. We've seen what's happened in Chicago, okay? In Toronto. Okay? We've been very fortunate that these things haven't happened here because we've been working very hard and diligently so that they don't occur. But the culture is comparable, and we have to fight against that on a regular basis. And one of the biggest things when it comes down to culture is how we deal with mental health. And I'll tell you, I look at the men and the women that I have the absolute honor of working with on a regular basis, most of whom haven't had a chance to go into a failed country in a failed state like Haiti to work. But day in, day out, they deal with other people's problems. Do you think that they're welcomed when they show up at the door? No, not whatsoever. Difference between us and firefighters, we're both first responders, is that for the most part they're welcome. Thank goodness the firefighter's here. And they also have chiseled abs. Okay? Well, I'm not too sure if my Chief Wiggum figure is up to standard. But the key is when our police officers are dispatched on a call, they're not, for the most part, welcome. And we hear people talk about, well, let's bring policing into the 21st century. Well, my version, or my view, and we heard it earlier on when it comes down to technology, technology really won't solve all of our problems. In fact, technology will probably, as things are today, cause us more problems than will allow us to solve. Body-worn cameras, okay? All types of surveillance equipment, okay? Better training, better equipment, drones, what have you, you can name it. Those things aren't going to deal with the individual problems that people have. To my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when somebody calls up the police and we have a dispatcher who's given the call from the call taker, they don't press a button that automatically takes care of all the problems. What do? They dispatch a person, a real live person that goes there. That's 19th century old school. It's the inherent challenge that we have, that we are dealing with people's problems and not with machines' problems. So when it comes down to policing in and of itself, we have that culture that is very, very strong. Day in, day out, when these police officers show up at the doors and they have to deal with the challenges that are there, spat upon, shot at, cut, yelled at. Sounds a bit like a hockey game. Anyways, all right, when they deal with that, you think that doesn't leave them with a lasting stress? And this is why we're hearing more and more about PTSD. So for myself, being able to influence people, the goal for me has been to be able to start that discussion in my organization. And I'll tell you, at night, I don't sleep. I wake up 5-6 times a night. You can ask my dear wife, who's seated right here. She has to learn nocturnal self-defense techniques, okay, when I'm thrashing about, so that she can calm me down and get me back to sleep. And there are days that I wake up and I don't want to go to work. But I think about the people on the front line, day in, day out, who are there, and they inspire me. They influence me to do that. So whereas in the past, what we used to do, we used to talk about, well, you've had a tough time, this is your third the third accident where you've had to pick up the body parts off the road. Come on with me. We'll grab a 40 ounce and we'll drink it together. Or you don't say anything. You suck it up, buttercup. Those days are gone. We now have a robust program that we're just rolling out right now called the Road to Mental Readiness, where we get people talking about how they feel. Wow, can you imagine that? Guys, okay, and gals, okay, who talk about how they feel, and they've just arrested a whole bunch of bad people. It's going to take time, there's no doubt about that. So how does that tie in for you folks? What can you learn from me, a simple police officer? Well, I think three things. Number one is get to know yourself. Understand what makes you tick. Understand what drives you. Be as brutally honest without being overly brutally honest with yourself, because you can always be your worst detractor. So it's to be able to understand who you are. Number two, without judging, because you'll judge yourself, do the same process for others. Understand what makes them tick. The inner work life of a person is composed of three things: people's perceptions, the lens through which they see things, their motivations, and their emotions. Try to understand that as best you can. And then, armed with that knowledge, take that knowledge of who you are and who these people are and get your hands dirty. Be involved. Do what you can do to make things better. But don't forget, it's just like on the airplane. When those masks come down, you got to put your mask on before you can put somebody else's mask on. So, take care of yourself. Take care of others. And that's how you make things better. That's how you can be the change that we are all looking for in our society and that we all need. Thank you very much.